Oh, wonderful. Another Death Worlder. Just what my perfectly organized training schedule needed. My name is Vel Kara, Senior Combat Instructor at the prestigious Nexus Combat Academy, floating proudly in the shadow of Station Helix 7. And yes, before you ask, I am exactly as impressive as I sound. 3 meters of pure HFY superiority, with chitinous plating that could deflect plasma rounds and reflexes that make hummingbirds look sluggish. I've trained the finest warriors from 17 different species, turned pampered noble brats into killing machines, and maintained a spotless record of excellence for the past 47 cycles. So naturally, the Academy Board decided to burden me with their latest brilliant idea, the Death Worlder Exchange Program. What a joke! The entire thing is nothing more than a galactic publicity stunt, designed to show how inclusive and progressive we've become. Look at us, embracing the primitive species from high-gravity death traps. How enlightened. How forward-thinking. How absolutely mind-numbingly stupid. The Nexus Combat Academy isn't some charity organization for evolutionary rejects. We're the premier military training facility in 3 sectors, where the galaxy's elite come to learn the art of warfare. Our graduates command fleets, lead ground invasions, and shape the tactical doctrines of entire civilizations. We don't babysit creatures who haven't figured out how to leave their own solar system without blowing themselves up. But here I am, staring at the latest victim exchange student standing in my pristine training bay like a lost child at a weapons expo. Meet Zara Blackwood, human female, approximately 22 standard years old, and quite possibly the most underwhelming specimen I've encountered in my entire career. She's tiny, barely reaching my second joint, with pale pink skin that looks like it would tear if you breathed on it too hard. Her hair is some brownish color that defies proper classification, tied back in what I assume passes for a practical style among her people. She's wearing our standard-issue training gear, which hangs on her frame like ceremonial draping on a skeleton. Seriously, this is what all the fuss is about. This fragile little creature from that backwater mudball they call Earth? I've seen more intimidating houseplants. The humans have been making noise about joining the Galactic Defense Coalition for cycles now, submitting applications, sending diplomatic envoys, practically begging to be taken seriously. The Council finally threw them a bone with this exchange program, probably hoping they'd realize how outclassed they are and quietly withdraw their application. Looking at Zara, I'd say that plan is working perfectly. She stands there with her hands clasped behind her back, those ridiculously small eyes taking in the training facility with what appears to be curiosity. Boredom? It's impossible to read expression on such a flat, primitive face. No proper mandibles, no antennae, no color-changing capabilities. How do these creatures communicate complex emotions? Grunting? Hand gestures? Welcome to your first day of actual combat training, I announced to the assembled class, as my voice carrying the authority of someone who's forgotten more about warfare than most species will ever learn. Today you'll be working in pairs for basic hand-to-hand assessment. The other students shift with anticipation. There's Thorak, a Gorvani bruiser whose biceps are thicker than Zara's entire torso. His species evolved from pack hunters on a planet where everything tried to eat everything else. He's been looking forward to this moment since the human arrived last week, cracking his knuckles with sounds like breaking timber. Then there's Silix, a Zenthari whose nervous system processes information at roughly 10 times the speed of most species. She's been practically vibrating with excitement, her forearms twitching in what I recognize as barely contained enthusiasm for violence. And then there's the human, still standing there, still looking present, not terrified, not excited, just there. This is going to be even more pathetic than I thought. The next few weeks played out exactly as I expected. Well, mostly. Our daily training routines are designed to push elite alien physiology to its absolute limits. We start each morning with a 30-kilometer run through the station's artificial gravity chambers, gradually increasing from standard 1G to a bone-crushing 4G by the final stretch. Then it's weapons training with plasma rifles that weigh more than most species' teenagers, followed by hand-to-hand combat drills that would hospitalize professional athletes from softer worlds. The human? She just kept up. Not impressively, mind you. She was always last in the runs, her tiny legs working overtime while proper warriors loped past her with casual ease. During weapons training, she needed both hands to steady rifles that Thorak could fire one-handed while doing handstands. But she finished. Every single day. Every single exercise. It was irritating. 20 credits says she's in the medical bay by week 3, announced instructor Kelal Das during our weekly faculty meeting. The Valaxian was practically rubbing his hands together with anticipation, his 6 eyes gleaming with malicious amusement. Too generous, scoffed Commander Nexus, our academy director. I give her 10 days before she realizes she's in over her head and requests transfer to a nice, safe xenobiology program. The betting pool grew daily. Instructor Velthis wagered that Zara would last exactly 17 days before suffering a training injury that would send her home. Dr. Kelvan, our medical officer, put his money on week 2, claiming he'd already prepared her medical evacuation paperwork as a time-saving measure. Everyone wanted in on the action. Everyone except me. Not because I had any faith in the human's abilities, you understand. I simply don't gamble on certainties. The creature was obviously going to wash out. The only question was whether it would be from injury, exhaustion, or the simple realization that she didn't belong among her betters. But week 3 came and went. Then week 4, then month 2. The human just kept showing up. What made it worse was how she approached everything with this insufferable calm. When Thorak accidentally knocked her across the training mat during sparring practice, she got up, wiped the blood from her nose, and asked if they could try the sequence again. When Silix's lightning-fast strikes left bruises across her arms and torso, she simply applied medical gel and continued with the lesson. Other students began watching her with a mixture of confusion and growing unease. Here was this tiny, soft creature from a primitive world getting beaten senseless on a daily basis, and she just kept coming back for more. It was unnatural. The academy hierarchy has always been beautifully simple. At the top you have the apex predator species, Kethrai like myself, the Gorvani bruisers, the Zenthari speed demons. Below us, the mid-tier civilizations with their adequate but unremarkable capabilities. At the bottom, the various client species who attend on scholarships and charity programs, grateful for the opportunity to learn from their superiors. Humans, obviously, belonged in that bottom tier. Probably below it, in a special category reserved for species too primitive to understand their own limitations. But Zara wasn't acting like she knew her place. She listened to instructions with the same focused attention as our best students. She asked questions that were disturbingly relevant. During tactical analysis sessions, she offered perspectives that were unconventional but not entirely stupid. It was as if she actually believed she belonged here, among real warriors. The sheer audacity was maddening. Perhaps, suggested instructor Kelthas after another betting pool payout, we should accelerate her timeline to the practical combat assessment. Ah, yes, the assessment. The Academy's final examination, where students face off against instructors in full-contact combat scenarios. It's designed to test everything: reflexes, tactical thinking, pain tolerance, and the killer instinct that separates true warriors from pretenders. Most students spend months preparing for it. Many don't survive it intact. Excellent idea, I agreed, already imagining the satisfying conclusion to this farce. Let's see how long her persistence lasts when the real fighting begins. Assessment day arrived with all the fanfare of a public execution, which, honestly, wasn't far from the truth. The main training arena had been cleared and reconfigured for full-contact combat scenarios. Reinforced barriers separated the fighting zone from the observation deck, where faculty members gathered with their recording devices and medical scanners. The betting pool had reached ridiculous proportions, with some instructors wagering entire month's salaries on specific injury types. 23 students stood at attention in the arena, representing the finest warriors from across the galaxy. Well, 22 finest warriors and one persistent human who somehow hadn't gotten the memo about knowing when to quit. Today marks your final examination, I announced, my voice echoing through the arena with practiced authority. You will face combat scenarios designed to test every aspect of your training. Your opponents will be drawn from the instructional staff, and I assure you, we will not be holding back. The students shifted with nervous energy. Even the most confident among them understood that instructors didn't achieve their positions through paperwork and positive attitudes. We were veterans of actual combat, survivors of real wars, predators who had earned our ranks through violence and victory. But Zara? She just stood there, hands at her sides, breathing normally. Not the rapid, shallow breaths of fear, or the deep, measured breaths of pre-combat preparation. Just normal breathing, like she was waiting for a transportation shuttle instead of potentially life-altering violence. It was infuriating. For our first demonstration, I continued, scanning the assembled students with predatory satisfaction. I'll need a volunteer to face Thorak in unarmed combat. The Gorvani stepped forward with a grin that showed far too many teeth. 3 meters of solid muscle and bone density that could shatter steel. Thorak represented everything the Academy stood for: overwhelming physical superiority backed by training and killer instinct. His people had been conquering neighboring worlds when humans were still figuring out agriculture. Perfect. Zara Blackwood, I called out, not bothering to hide my anticipation. You'll be Thorak's opponent. The arena fell silent. Other students exchanged glances that ranged from sympathy to barely concealed excitement. This wasn't going to be a fight, it was going to be a demonstration of natural selection in action. Thorak's grin widened. I'll try to make it quick, little Deathworlder, he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. Though I can't promise it won't hurt. The other students began murmuring among themselves, some placing last-minute side bets, others discussing the medical implications of what they were about to witness. Silix actually started a countdown timer on her wrist display, apparently curious about the exact duration of human consciousness under extreme duress. Through it all, Zara remained calm. Not stoic, not brave, not even resigned, just calm. Like this was another routine training exercise instead of a public execution disguised as education. That's when something inside me snapped. Here I was offering this primitive creature a valuable lesson about the realities of galactic power structures, and she couldn't even do me the courtesy of being appropriately terrified? Where was the trembling? The pleading? The desperate requests for alternative assessment methods? Instead, she was making me look like I was bullying a child who didn't understand the danger she was in. Is there something amusing about this situation, Cadet Blackwood? I demanded, stepping closer to her position in the center of the arena. No, Instructor Velcara, she replied in that flat, emotionless tone that humans apparently used for everything. I'm ready to begin when you are. Ready? Ready? This soft, pathetic creature thought she was ready to face a Gorvani warrior in single combat? The sheer arrogance was breathtaking. Before I could stop myself, before rational thought could intervene, my hand moved in a sharp, precise arc across her face. The slap echoed through the arena like a plasma rifle discharge. Dead silence followed. Zara's head had snapped to the side with the impact, a bright red mark blooming across her pale cheek. But she didn't fall, didn't cry out, didn't even stagger. She simply turned her head back to face me, those small, dark eyes meeting mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. And that's when I realized I might have made a terrible mistake. The other instructors' reactions varied wildly. Kewas looked horrified, all 6 eyes wide with shock. Commander Nexus had gone completely still, his expression unreadable. Doctor. Kelvon was already reaching for his medical scanner, though whether to treat Zara or document what happened next, I couldn't tell. But Zara? She just stood there, completely still, completely calm, with that red handprint on her face and something new in her eyes. Something that made my chitinous plating suddenly feel inadequate. What happened next defied every law of physics, biology, and common sense that I thought I understood. Zara moved. Not like the other species moved. Not with the flowing grace of Zenthari speed or the calculated precision of Kethrai combat forms. She moved like violence itself had suddenly taken physical form and decided to introduce itself to my facial structure. Her right hand came up in what I initially dismissed as a pathetic attempt at defense. Humans, after all, had those ridiculous soft appendages they called fingers, lacking proper claws or striking surfaces. What could she possibly accomplish with those fleshy little? The impact hit my left arm with the force of an industrial mining drill. I heard the sound before I felt the pain. A wet, sharp crack that echoed through the arena like breaking timber, followed immediately by a sensation I hadn't experienced since my early combat days. Ooh, the unique agony of bones separating in ways they were never designed to separate. My left ulna, a bone that had withstood plasma blasts and vibroblade strikes, snapped cleanly in 2 places. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching, in slow-motion horror, as the jagged ends of my own bone pushed through my chitinous plating like it was decorative paper. A compound fracture. On a HFY, inflicted by a human female who weighed less than my equipment harness. The physics were impossible. Humans were supposed to be soft, weak creatures from a low-gravity world. Their bone density was laughable compared to proper warrior species. Their muscle mass was pathetic. Their reflexes were. Another impact, this time to my solar nerve cluster. I had exactly enough time to register that Zara had somehow moved from arm's length to point-blank range without me seeing the transition. Her left elbow connected with the precise center of my torso, striking the one spot where HFY physiology created a vulnerability gap between armor plates. The air left my lungs in a rush that sounded embarrassingly like a deflating atmospheric seal. I staggered backward, my vision blurring as pain signals flooded my nervous system. My left arm hung at an impossible angle, bone fragments visible through tears in my natural armor. My respiratory system struggled to restart after the nerve strike, producing undignified wheezing sounds that no senior instructor should ever make in front of students. Through it all, Zara followed my movement with predatory precision. This wasn't the bumbling incompetence I'd observed during training exercises. This wasn't the slow, clumsy human who struggled to keep up with basic drills. This was something else entirely, something that moved like it had been designed specifically for killing things larger and stronger than itself. Her pain tolerance was inhuman. Literally. The slap that should have sent her reeling barely seemed to register. The red mark on her face might as well have been decorative paint for all the effect it appeared to have on her combat effectiveness. But her combat instincts? Those were terrifying. She didn't fight like she'd been trained at the academy. She fought like someone who had learned violence in a place where mistakes meant death, where there were no referees or safety protocols. Every movement was economical, brutal, and targeted at maximum damage with minimum effort. The other students had gone completely silent. Thorak, who moments earlier had been eager to demonstrate Gorvani's superiority, now stood frozen with his mouth hanging open. Silix's forearms were trembling, though whether from fear or excitement was impossible to determine. Several of the younger students had actually backed away from the combat area, their survival instincts finally overriding their curiosity about human capabilities. Medical emergency in Arena 1. Dr. Kelvon's voice echoed through the facility's communication system. All medical personnel respond immediately. We have a Code 7 fracture situation. Code 7. Reserved for injuries so severe they required immediate surgical intervention to prevent permanent disability. I'd seen Code 7 injuries before, usually inflicted by military-grade weaponry or industrial accidents, not by tiny human hands. Emergency lights began flashing throughout the arena as medical drones descended from their storage alcoves. The advanced life support systems activated, flooding the area with diagnostic scanners and emergency medical fields. Through the chaos of medical emergency protocols, I found myself staring at Zara with a mixture of shock, pain, and something approaching respect. She stood exactly where the confrontation had ended, not advancing, not retreating, just waiting. Instructor Velkara struck me, she said in that same flat, matter-of-fact tone she used for everything. Her voice carried clearly through the arena, audible to everyone present despite the medical alarms. Human defensive responses are automatic when we perceive threats to our physical safety. Defensive responses. She called that a defensive response. Our species evolved on a world where everything was actively trying to kill us, she continued, apparently addressing the assembled students as much as the medical team now surrounding me. Large predators, environmental hazards, resource competition with other human groups. We developed certain adaptations. The human was discussing the systematic destruction of my arm like it was a biology lesson. When humans feel threatened, our adrenaline production increases dramatically. Our pain sensitivity decreases. Our reflexes accelerate beyond normal parameters. These are survival mechanisms from our evolutionary development. The medical drones were already applying emergency stabilization fields to my fractured arm while Dr. Kelvon ran diagnostic scans. Through the haze of pain medication being administered directly into my bloodstream, I could hear his muttered commentary about bone displacement and surgical reconstruction requirements. But all I could focus on was Zara, standing there with that red handprint still visible on her face, explaining human biology like she was reading from a textbook instead of standing over the broken body of her instructor. "I apologize for the severity of the injury," she added, though her tone suggested the apology was more for protocol than genuine remorse. Human defensive responses are not easily modulated once activated. Not easily modulated, like she was some kind of organic weapon system with calibration issues. As the medical team prepared to transport me to the surgical bay, one thought kept echoing through my pain-addled consciousness. If this was what humans called a defensive response, what would they consider an actual attack? The next 72 hours turned into a masterclass in bureaucratic panic, scientific revelation, and personal humiliation that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemies. Commander Nexus spent the first day in continuous communication with the Galactic Defense Coalition's diplomatic corps, explaining how a routine training exercise had resulted in a senior instructor requiring emergency bone reconstruction surgery. The phrase diplomatic incident appeared in official reports no fewer than 47 times, usually preceded by words like catastrophic and career-ending. Meanwhile, I lay in the medical bay, my left arm encased in a regeneration matrix that would take weeks to fully repair the damage. Dr. Kelvon had been forced to use military-grade surgical techniques typically reserved for battlefield trauma. Apparently, human bone density creates fracture patterns that don't respond well to standard healing procedures. "Fascinating," he muttered during one of his examinations, studying the diagnostic readings with disturbing enthusiasm. The impact force required to create this type of injury should have shattered every bone in her hand. Yet the human shows no signs of damage whatsoever. While I recovered, the Academy's research department launched into an investigation that should have been conducted before we ever accepted a human student. What they found made our previous assumptions look like children's fairy tales. Humans weren't just from a high-gravity world. They were from a planet that had spent millions of years actively trying to murder everything that lived on it. Predators that could crush starship hulls with their bite force. Weather patterns that could level cities. Geological instability that made volcanoes a recreational hazard. And somehow humans had not only survived but thrived in this environment. The research team's preliminary report landed on my bedside table with all the subtlety of an orbital bombardment. Key findings included human bone density, approximately 3 times higher than previously estimated. Human muscle fiber composition, optimized for explosive power rather than endurance. Human pain tolerance, classified as abnormally high by galactic medical standards. Human reflex response time, fast enough to dodge projectile weapons at close range. But the real revelation came when they analyzed the Deathworlder classification system itself. Turns out the term Deathworlder wasn't meant to describe worlds that would kill their inhabitants. It was meant to describe worlds that would kill everything else. Planets so hostile that only the most adaptable, resilient, and dangerous species could survive long enough to develop intelligence. We hadn't been babysitting a primitive species. We'd been hosting an apex predator. The incident recording spread through the galactic military network like a virus. Within days, every major species had downloaded copies for analysis. The Zenthari Combat Institute requested detailed biological specifications for research purposes. The Gorvani War Council added humans to their list of species requiring careful diplomatic consideration. Even the Valaxians, who considered everyone else beneath their notice, started asking questions about Earth's defensive capabilities. Through it all, Zara maintained her infuriatingly casual attitude about the entire situation. "I really am sorry about your arm," she said during one of her daily visits to the medical bay. "I tried to pull the strike once I realized you weren't actually threatening me, but human reflexes are difficult to interrupt once they activate." Pull the strike? She had pulled the strike? What would have happened if she had followed through? I decided I didn't want to know. The Academy's policy changes came swiftly and comprehensively. Each new regulations required full species capability assessments before enrollment. Combat training protocols were modified to account for extreme physiological variations. Most importantly, the instructor code of conduct was updated to specifically prohibit physical contact with students from uncharted biological backgrounds. They probably should have led with that last one. The other students' attitudes toward Zara shifted dramatically. The casual mockery disappeared, replaced by cautious respect and barely concealed fear. Thorak, who had been eagerly anticipating their sparring match, suddenly developed an urgent interest in studying Zenthari poetry. Silix started practicing her diplomatic negotiation skills. Smart choices all around. As for the Deathworlder exchange program, it was quietly suspended pending comprehensive review of safety protocols. The official announcement cited scheduling conflicts and curriculum adjustments, but everyone understood the real reason. We had invited apex predators to play with our children, and only luck had prevented a genuine massacre. The worst part, Zara had passed her practical combat assessment with the highest scores in Academy history. Her performance against me was officially classified as demonstrating exceptional tactical awareness and appropriate force modulation under stress. Appropriate force modulation, like she was a weapons system with user-friendly controls. Maybe she was? 6 months later, I can move my left arm without wanting to scream. The regeneration matrix did its job, though Dr. Kelvon assures me I'll always have an interesting scar pattern where human knuckles redefined my bone structure. A permanent reminder of the day I learned that evolutionary assumptions make terrible combat strategies. Zara graduated with full honors, naturally. Top marks in tactical analysis, combat effectiveness, and something the review board called adaptive threat response. She accepted her certification with the same calm demeanor she'd shown throughout her entire stay, thanked the faculty for their instruction, and departed for Earth with her completed training records. I heard she's been assigned to the human military's new interspecies liaison division. Apparently, they're planning to expand their presence in galactic affairs. How wonderful for all of us. The irony isn't lost on me. We spend so much time congratulating ourselves on our advanced civilizations, our sophisticated technologies, our refined understanding of warfare and diplomacy. And then along comes a species that learned to fight by surviving on a planet that treated genocide as a geological hobby. Then suddenly our superiority looks like the delusion it always was. The truly infuriating part? We did this to ourselves. We looked at humans and saw what we wanted to see, primitive creatures from a backwater world who should be grateful for our attention. We never bothered to ask why a species would need to evolve such extreme survival capabilities, or what kind of environment would produce creatures that could break advanced military hardware with their bare hands. We assumed intelligence meant weakness. We assumed technology meant fragility. We assumed that species who hadn't conquered half the galaxy were somehow inferior to those who had. Turns out, some species don't need to conquer the galaxy. They just need to survive long enough for the galaxy to come to them. The latest intelligence reports suggest that human applications for coalition membership have increased by 400% since the Academy incident. Apparently, word has spread about Earth's defensive capabilities, and several human nations are eager to demonstrate their readiness for galactic citizenship. Other species are taking notice. The HFY High Command has quietly added Earth to their list of planets requiring respectful diplomatic approaches. The Zenthari Council issued official guidelines for appropriate interaction protocols with Deathworlder species. Even the Gorvani, who consider diplomacy a sign of weakness, have started using phrases like mutually beneficial cooperation when discussing human relations. Smart moves, all around. As for me, I've developed a healthy respect for creatures that can smile politely while calculating the exact force required to snap your spine. Call it professional development. The Academy has received 17 more human applications for next semester's exchange program. I've already requested a transfer to the Strategic Planning Department. Some lessons are best learned from a safe distance.